The Abrahamic religions are like the Garden of Eden's endless blossoms. The most well-known flowers of this garden, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are three roses that have cross-fertilized each other with their fragrance and colors ever since they began to coexist in Arabia in the 600s. Despite the separation of their legendary ancestors Isaac and Ishmael, Judaism and Islam have coexisted since the time of Muhammad. During the height of medieval Muslim power, Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews were present in Islamic courts, and contributed to many of the scientific and cultural achievements of the Islamic Golden Age. It was also during this era that some of Judaism's most interesting developments occurred. So, what did Jewish communities look like in the Islamic world? What was that before moving forward? Please subscribe to the channel. It will immensely help and motivate. So, what did Jewish communities look like in the Islamic world? What was their relationship with their Islamic rulers? And how did Judaism's finest poets and philosophers engage with the cosmopolitan Islamic cultural milieus? The midwife of Islam. Jews in pre-Islamic and Muhammad's Arabia. Judaism and Islam's relationship begins in the Arabian Peninsula, where Jews had been living for centuries before the rise of Islam. When the Prophet Muhammad was born, there were already ancient established Jewish communities in Arabia, including one in Medina. These communities coexisted with other religious groups, such as pagans, Christians, Zoroastrians, Gnostics, and Hanifs of various stripes. In southern Arabia, Jewish influence had a prominent influence on the culture of the Himyarite kingdom, which may have been a Jewish kingdom during part of its existence. It is also possible that sects of Jewish Christians, like the Ebionites, probably lived in Arabia after going extinct in the Near East and likely had some influence on early Islam. When Muhammad arrived in Medina after his expulsion from Mecca, happened to have become a mediator of local disputes. The Constitution of Medina, a document that may date to this period, recognizes the Jews as a group with freedom of religion. The Constitution seems to recognize the Jews as a community with their own obligations. Sources mention that the Sabbath and Yom Kippur were observed by the Muslim community in Medina. It is thus possible that Judaism had some influence on early Islam directly. Although this natal version of Islam still differed from Judaism in a few ways, such as what it considered kosher or halal. The Quran recognizes the Jews as al-Kitab, people of the book, alongside the Christians. The battles that Muhammad fought against the Jewish tribes of Arabia like the Banu Qurayza or the Khaybar are more geopolitical than anti-Semitic. Theologically, the Quran sees the Psalms and Torah of the Hebrew Bible as revealed scripture of Islam that was later corrupted, which is also how it interprets the Gospels of the New Testament. Various Quranic surahs mention Judaism. Throughout the Middle Ages, Islamic polities were generally more tolerant of Jewish communities than their medieval Christian counterparts were, but were not immune from episodes of persecution, like in the Almohad Kingdom, which attempted to convert them to Islam alongside Christians. By the end of Muhammad's life, the Jewish tribes that had moved to Arabia or had converted to Judaism all lived under the Islamic Caliphate and in the early Muslim expansions. They fought alongside their Muslim cousins to conquer the Middle East, from Khorasan's endless steppes to Al-Andalus's rocky hills. The early Islamic caliphates such as the Rashidun and Umayyads placed little focus on conversion, and thus major Christian and Jewish hubs like Babylon and Antioch remained relatively active in the intellectual life of their faiths, though some rural communities later began to convert to Islam. In fact, various Islamic rulers used Christian, Mandaean, Zoroastrian, and Jewish sages and philosophers in the translation movement during this period and elevated them to prominent positions within the intellectual milieu of places like Baghdad, Cairo, and Taifa. Jews, as well as other peoples of the book like Christians, were dhimmis, or second-class citizens. This meant they had certain guarantees towards freedom of religion, but also were saddled with financial obligations not expected of Muslims. The synagogues. Jewish communal organization. There were two major forms of Judaism that predominated in the early Islamic world: Rabbinical Judaism, and its offshoot, Karaite Judaism. Karaite Judaism was founded during this period in Iraq, when two brothers contested for the role of the local communal leader of the Jewish community of Iraq, or Exilarch around 760 CE. The losing brother, Anan ben David, began a schism, with one story claiming that he did this in prison after discussing with the Islamic scholar Abu Hanifa, who convinced him that oral law was not important in legal interpretation. Karaite Judaism's major theological selling point is that in terms of Jewish law or halakha, only the Torah is thought to play a role, whereas Rabbinical Judaism also uses oral law, or the Talmud. Karaites are minimal in number today, but they used to be very numerous in Iraq and Egypt. Karaite rabbinical relations were paradoxical, with both sects expressing open hostility towards each other and their beliefs on one hand, while intermarriage between the two groups being common on the other. Both Karaite and Rabbinical Jews ended up working in Islamic courts in various functions. Rabbinical Judaism during the Islamic Golden Age was adopting a new unique form of organizing itself, the so-called Age of the Geonim. The Geonim were like medieval Judaism's equivalent of the vice-chancellors of Oxford and Cambridge, for they presided over large Jewish academies in Babylon which studied the Torah, and also presided over the running the Jewish calendar, influencing Jewish communities worldwide. In addition, there were also different forms of the Talmud during this period. The Babylonian Talmud, the revision of the Talmud that is universally used by Jews today, had been redacted in the 500 CE and was being commented on by various rabbinical scholars. However, the Babylonian Talmud had a competitor, the Jerusalem Talmud. This version was likely developed in hubs of Jewish thought in Palestine like Tiberias, as evidenced using Aramaic utilized in the text. Both Talmud had some popularity in the late Antique and early medieval period, but the Jerusalem Talmud faded in popularity by the Islamic period in the 700 CE and fell out of use as Babylon gained prominence. By the end of the 10th century, the Rishdonic period of Jewish history began as the Geonim in Babylon gave way to locally influential rabbis. This was defined by leading regional rabbis like Moshe de Leon, who wrote the Zohar, Kabbalah's most important text, and Abraham Abulafia, who founded ecstatic Kabbalah, a form of Kabbalah focusing on asceticism and prophetic experiences. During the Rishdonic period, there were prominent Jewish communities in Al-Andalus, the Maghrib, Yemen, Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Central Asia. There, they intermingled with local populations and developed their own distinct cultural traditions. The Jews of Morocco and Palestine had a presence in villages, while the Jews of Egypt and Andalusia were more urbanized. The Gardens. Jewish cultural development, the Islamic Golden Age, well known for its great advances in art, science, and literature, was also an era of great cultural advancement for the Jewish people. Both as members of broader Islamic societies, as well as inside their own communities, Jewish peoples experienced magnificent cultural development through their access to the Islamic cosmopolitan milieus of Mecca, Athens, Persepolis, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. The most famous Jewish thinker of the time is Moses Maimonides, or Moshe ben Maimon. Born in Cordoba in 1135 or 1138 CE as a scion of a line of Talmudic judges, or Dayains, he was educated in various Hellenistic philosophies via Arabic translations as well as Jewish halakha and medicine. Islamic influences also appear in his philosophy. His Mishnah Torah, a codification of Jewish law, was immensely controversial and popular, shaping Jewish law in matters such as marriage, property, and other secular matters. Maimonides' work as both physician and Jewish sage are much celebrated, and his seminal work of theology, The Guide for the Perplexed, was both popular and controversial for its merging of Hellenic and Jewish thought through an Islamic lens. The workplace. Jews in IslamicAteWorld. The Islamic world, despite experiencing much political turmoil over the centuries, maintained vibrant trade connections and economic development even after the fragmentation of the Umayyad Caliphate. Jews, like their Christian and Samaritan siblings, contributed to this prosperity in various professions. Usually, military and bureaucratic jobs were not open to non-Muslims, but some Jews managed to work in royal courts regardless. One such man, Shemuel ibn Nagrilla, or Samuel ha-Nagid, worked in the Umayyad government in Cordoba in the late 900s CE. Ha-Nagid was a scribe to the king Habis al-Muzaffar and even became prime minister of the Taifa of Granada and even allegedly commanded armies in battle. With his money, he funded the cultural development of various Jewish communities around the Mediterranean. Egyptian Jewish communities where Pali communities were participating in the courts of various Egyptian sultans and caliphs as royal scribes and physicians. Throughout the Islamic world, Jews found success as cosmopolitan traveling merchants, working in the transport and sales of goods throughout Central Asia, Iran, and the Arabic world. Various letters in local Jewish languages, such as Judeo-Persian, speak to the presence of tradesmen and their conduct with their fellow cosmopolitans in various matters. Jewish mercantile activity continued despite some bouts of occasional persecution and remained strong even during periods of long-term turmoil such as the Abbasid Civil War or the Mongol invasions. Thus, we can see that the Islamic world was a space where Jewish communities actively participated in various spheres of life. The coffeehouses. Intercommunal relations. We will now move on to intercommunal relations. During the pre-Islamic era and throughout the Islamic conquests in Arabia, the Jewish tribes of Arabia tended to coexist in relative harmony with their neighbors, and while disputes did emerge, local tribal affiliations were more likely to be the reason for conflict than the religion of said tribes. Did this shift with the advent of Islam? As we have seen, there was a general view of tolerance in the Islamic Golden Age, but we also know that moments of anti-Semitic hatred occurred. For instance, the Granada massacre of 1066 CE, where Muslim mobs stormed the Granada palace and killed many of the Jews of the city, including the son of the then-deceased Samuel ha-Nagid. Another example of anti-Semitism in the medieval Islamic world is the reign of Caliph al-Hakim of the Fatimids, who placed very severe restrictions on the Jews of Egypt. At times, some Islamic caliphs, such as those of the Almohad dynasty, would try to force the al-Khattab to convert to Islam. In general, however, Jews had a more tolerated and open existence than in Christendom, as they had guaranteed rights in the Islamic world not afforded to their estranged kinsmen in Europe. In the medieval Islamic world, the average relationship between citizens of various faiths was likely built around everyday needs and interactions. This pre-modern form of relative tolerance and coexistence survived until the coming of European capitalism and colonialism in the 20th century. This does not mean that casual prejudice did not exist, but given the integration of Jews in various spheres of life in the Islamic world. I hope you like this video. To watch more content like this, please subscribe and comment your feedback. Thanks for watching.